Thank you, Con, and thank you, Dr. Paul Willis, for hosting us all today here, and good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to be back in Adelaide and to give what is my first formal address with a new hat on as Chair of Innovation Australia. So again, thank you for the invitation from CEDA to do so. Paul, you mentioned the Hana people of the Adelaide Plains, and it was, of course, Adelaide, I think, would claim to be the first historical start-up of a free settlement in this country, albeit on our traditional landowners' premises. And not too far up the road from where we are came that wonderful invention of the stump jump plough in 1876. Designed by Richard Smith and improved by his younger brother Clarence, this new technology plough enabled a breakthrough for farming lands of the Mallee district and beyond. And no longer would farmers be grubbing out tree stumps upon acres and acres. This invention was followed by a 4-year proof of concept and redesign phase. Then a startup production facility was financed by the Harris Scarf and Company in 1880. And soon thereafter, 100 jobs were created along with the stunning productivity gains that we saw in the development of broadacre farming. Richard Smith, the original inventor, later went to live in Western Australia, and his brother Clarence built a factory in Androsson, just about, 150 k's from where we are, I think, and enabled him with that facility to fill rapid build-up of orders from around the country. I like this story not only because it involves an invention with huge benefits to people not just in this country, but around the world, and because it demonstrates well the difference between invention and innovation. Innovation involves the commercialisation process from proof of concept through startup and later stage market entry, and hopefully in further expansion into larger corporate structure and markets. And the Smith brothers were undoubtedly among the best of the country's early innovators on that test. Perhaps in New South Wales we would claim John MacArthur's tenacity with the sourcing and breeding of merino sheep, then developing a fine wool product as further quintessential evidence of innovation from early colonial days. In the 1820s, MacArthur, his exports of wool, the market that he developed, those exports made him the richest man in New South Wales at the time. Another early innovation was James Harrison's ether-based cooling, almost freezing technology of the day in 1857, making possible the export of uncured meats to the mother country. These are just a few examples confirming that innovations are not new to Australia, and indeed there is a noble lineage to be claimed. Since those early days, there have been, of course, many, many more Australian inventions impacting the living standards of people worldwide. And I often try out my favourite 12 inventors quiz on unsuspecting friends and others. I might spare you the embarrassment of answering this quiz today, although I expect you would score very highly. 12 inventions. Just quick run through. Xerography, the forerunner of the Xerox copy. Who knows who the inventor is? X-ray crystallography, which led to the X-ray machine development. Cardiac pacemaker. Atomic absorption spectrophotometry, which transformed physical sciences. The orbital engine, ice making, I told you who that was, and you've forgotten already. The black box flight recorder, the bionic ear, penicillin, microsurgery, the discovery and cause and cure for ulcers caused by Helicobacter, and the vaccine against cervical cancer. There are 12, I've got more, but there are 12, I think you'd agree they're not niche, esoteric breakthroughs. They are ideas and processes and products and services that have influenced the lives of people around the world, big time. But in spite of the awesome nature and impact of these world's firsts, the average quiz score in Australia is 4 out of 12. In fact, when you pose the list and ask how many of them were made by Australians, it's usually about 4 out of 12. They were all Australian inventions. And sadly, this recall or this knowledge is probably what it is because the commercialisation of the vast majority of these wonderful breakthroughs have been achieved by non-Australian innovators. So fast forwarding to this century, as chairman of the Garvan Institute of Medical Research, which Con mentioned in his introductions, I've been privileged to witness up close the continuing discoveries and inventions arising from Australia's health and medical research sector. It's a remarkable performance and now places Australia in the top 3 or 4 nations worldwide in terms of research breakthroughs as verified and acknowledged by the leading medical science publications. And national research prowess can be similarly evidenced in other fields, including astronomy and the environment, agriculture, engineering, information and technology, renewable energies, and much more. Of this, Australians can and should be justly proud. I cannot, however, make a similar boast about our ability to commercialise and to get our fair share of the world's marketplace from this intellectual property and inventiveness. Australia is struggling to even stay within the top 30 OECD countries in terms of any commercialisation metrics. And as a result, we are now at risk of squandering opportunities created by our highly credentialed research platforms, for example, in the health and medical research sector. To talk about that sector again, unless we expand our investment in clinical trialling and in the development of new drugs and devices for Australian and world markets, we will lose the opportunity to create substantial increases in jobs, exports and profits. And this is not just about today's jobs and exports and profits, although that is of critical importance to immediate prosperity. It is also about future jobs, exports, profits as new industries and disruptive technologies that Con referred to in his introduction continue to make huge impacts on traditional industry. So we have to build new businesses, new ways of doing things from the bottom up and top down if we want to have a robust economy for future generations. For future generations that will also experience growth in jobs, in exports and in profits. At another level, the importance of this innovation process is all about national prowess, about international leadership, ability to help solve the problems of diseases of all sorts, to play a role in the development of renewables, and to create better jobs that will survive what seems inevitable in terms of the thrusts of automation and artificial intelligence, likely within the next two decades. For innovation to impact at this higher national level, it has to be embedded in the thinking of all Australians. We have to embed the excitement, the enthusiasm, the knowledge about innovation throughout the Australian community. The Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, and Industry, Innovation and Science Minister Christopher Pyne have made this abundantly clear by elevating innovation to national priority status in government policy. Hallelujah. But what are some of the challenges to this imperative of improving our ability to innovate? Some insights can be gleaned from the 2015 Australian Innovation System Report, which I'm pleased to release today. This is a report done annually by the Department of Industry, Innovation and Science, and it, among other things, provides a valuable tracking of our innovation ecosystems. I commend the report to you, and among its many findings, just a few I'll mention here. And the report, I think is in fact available for those of you present to pick up on the way out, and will be online for others interested today. Australia is highly ranked as an early adopter of others' innovations and a very good modifier of those innovations. Yet it ranks poorly in new to the world and new to the market innovations of its own. Another observation in the report, lack of access to additional funds and lack of skilled people are the two main barriers to innovation for all young SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, which makes up the bulk of enterprises in this country. Also, 75% of all Australian businesses have siloed or no innovation culture whatsoever, 75%. While academic collaboration nationally and internationally is thriving, collaboration between Australian business, academia, university and research organisations is amongst the lowest in the OECD. In thinking about this and possible solutions, I have found it useful to create an action matrix, in a sense. I should have it on the screen, but I'll try with waving my arms around to sort of describe what I'm thinking about. If you imagine on the horizontal axis, list some priority sectors like agribusiness, like bioscience, like fintech, like advanced manufacturing, like oil and gas and renewables. Pick your favourite, what you think are the 6 or 7 priority sectors. And on the vertical axis, think stage of growth. So seed to startup, to later stage startup, to expansion capital for SMEs, to big funding for major corporates and major projects. So you got this on my graph, and maybe 6 by 6 equals 36. There's sort of 36 categories of problem-solving boxes you can look at. Did that make sense, that matrix? Great. And obviously in each box, there are different impediments and different possible solutions. So there isn't any single magic wand that government or anybody else can wave here to absolutely turbocharge and change innovation throughout the entire ecosystems in Australia. For example, an entrepreneur with an IT business startup app might well find out within 12 to 18 months whether or not her product gets traction, enough traction to warrant scaling up. Compare this with the biotech entrepreneur funding clinical trials process, and which may require years, many years, and much greater funding before he has the in-person evidence to have any chance of real commercialisation success. Without delving box by box in that matrix, let me say that I think there are 6 key challenges to accelerating innovation in Australia as follows. First, access to risk capital funding. Second, access to business and entrepreneurship skills. Third, access to international markets. Fourth, lack of active collaboration for commercial outcomes. That is, the inadequate collaboration extant among universities and other research institutes with business entities, governments and venture capitalists in this country. Number five, insufficient investment and interest in STEM curricula of our schools, our vet colleges and our universities. And six, a risk-averse culture which often results in the fear of failure trumping the excitement of gain relative to other cultures and business communities around the world. The Prime Minister and Minister Pyne are intending to provide a national innovation and science agenda pretty soon, next month, before Christmas. Bring it on, ministers. But I think by mid-December, with any luck. I'm confident that this will be a comprehensive blueprint and one which will include a number of significant measures to deal with the list of challenges I have just outlined. And I'd like to, in this time we have, just to talk about a couple of those challenges in the context of this pending innovation statement. So, if you go back to the first challenge, access to risk capital in this country. A lot of initiatives are on the table, a lot of feedback, a lot of inputs being received around the country on this issue, and from crowdfunding to possible tax deductions for high net worth angel investors, improvements necessary for the venture capital limited partnership and early stage venture capital limited partnership structures to really do their job and attract both domestic and international capital, including, by the way, ideas for the management of the new SIV monies. SIV, significant investor visas, which have arisen from some Department of Foreign Affairs initiatives, and those monies are accelerating and building up into an interesting new source of funding for venture capital. All of these areas and suggestions for improving them are on the table. And of course, one of the longest standing interventions of federal government in recognition of the need to motivate R&D spending throughout industry is the Research and Development Incentive Scheme, running at about $3 billion per annum. This scheme is sector agnostic with open access to all size enterprises. The evidence suggests that this scheme should be improved by a sharper focus on a higher growth and R&D intensive set of businesses. If I just talk to then, say, challenge number 4, the lack of active collaboration. I've had several meetings now with the Israeli chief scientist visiting Sydney and Melbourne and Canberra and other places this week with a team from the chief scientist's office, Mr. Avi Hasson. And he's made the repeated point that the core to the success of Israel's performance, and they are ranked as the #1 innovator in the world in terms of spend per GDP, in terms of number of inventions, in terms of share of exports. I think over 50% of Israel's exports are now high-tech exports. But in any event, the core to that success has been collaboration. Sounds pretty simple. Collaboration. He describes his own job as the chief matchmaker. Very entrepreneurial chief scientist, and he's obviously done a fantastic job for his country. You'll say, and I understand, that clearly Israel's and Australia's conditions are quite different. Size, geography, existential threats, role of the defence in technology development and in skills training. You know, big differences. And of course, absence of natural resources to rely on. So what are you going to do? Australia's got some different circumstances, but boy, there's some good lessons coming from Israel. There's some great lessons from other countries, and no overseas template is going to just work for us. But we certainly can do some listening and some learnings. And I think that the big challenge for us, I think it'll be a big challenge for Innovation Australia, is to really work through how do we really change and really make collaboration a much bigger event in our daily lives. So in particular, how do we get the research institutes and the universities and business and venture capitalists and government programs coordinated for a better outcome on commercialising the wonderful research and discoveries that our research platforms have been generating. We don't want to squander that. We've got to capitalise on it. And so I'm stating the obvious perhaps, but when you think about why, we might be able to talk further about this in Q&A, I suspect, but why it is rational behaviour for researchers, given the nature of the funding programs in Australia, to concentrate on basic research, great work, publications for career enhancement, and for qualifying for the next round of grants. That all makes sense. But without some attempt to measure outcomes, impact of some of that work into commercial marketplace outcomes, we won't get the collaboration. Similarly, we need to expect a lot more from the business community in helping to work through this and to do so in the immediate years ahead. And I think that there'll be some things emerging in the, I hope, in the agenda statement that will be very relevant to all of that. It is urgent to make a start on all of these challenges, but it is also important to manage expectations. Changed behaviour such as that required for significant improvement in business and academia collaboration for commercial outcomes will take years, not months. Nonetheless, my sense is Australians understand the importance of this innovation imperative. I think they get the fact that startups and small businesses of less than 2 years in age since or between the GFC, the global financial crisis years, and 2012 actually created 1.4 million new jobs. It's an amazing statistic. And it's powerful evidence of what is possible in the years ahead. So I'll conclude, I think, by saying that I share the Prime Minister's view when he recently said, this is a very exciting time to be an Australian. Thank you.